The sexual miseducation of black men in America. It explores and explains the psychological, emotional, behavioral, and relational impact that our sexual conditioning has had on us as black men. For far too long, we have allowed one of the smallest organs on our body to have the most control over our lives. In this book, we will explore the impact that our sexual miseducation has had on every part of our lives as black men. We will re-educate the next generation of men on how to value themselves by teaching them real ways of measuring their manhood and combating the notion that their manhood is based on the number of women that they sleep with or how well they perform in the bedroom. The sexual miseducation of black men in America will help parents in our community understand what it will take to grow their prince into the position of king. We will assist black men with overcoming one of the biggest struggles that we are faced with. That is the temptation of casual and meaningless sex. This alone has stopped millions of us from living up to our full potential. The sexual miseducation of black men in America. It's coming.
And mainly the unhealthy sexual habits that we learn, the unhealthy sexual lessons that we learn as black men. A lot of it affects us in so many different ways, psychologically, behaviorally, emotionally.
The act of sex in, 5th or 6th grade in health class, they start to talk to you about what sex is.
I tell her he loved her when he didn't really love her, right? And so what I took from that was, I'm never going to say those words unless I mean it.
End up being with this chick. She might just be a one-nighter and that's it. So we don't get out that stage until we like older. I mean, it's sad, but it's realistic.
It's almost like slowly pushing all the other people out, because at one time we all have multiple chicks here, there, and other way.
He didn't explain nothing or nothing. He just stopped hitting her up on that regard, stopped answering what she requested, and she kind of went off on him. And he was like, "Oh no, I got into a relationship, so I just didn't. It wasn't really appropriate." But she was like, "Well, you could have told me."
Welcome to the sexual miseducation of black men in America. I'm your host for tonight, A.B. Bracewell, and I got two great brothers with me, Brother Jared, Brother Tamel, or should I say Elder Tamel Brown. Tonight, we're talking about the sex and spirituality. If you don't know, if you've been following my page, you might have seen that I'm coming out with a book which is entitled The Sexual Miseducation of Black Men in America. It drops tomorrow, March 18th. I have the book launch going on at 4 p.m. here in Philadelphia. So if you're in the area, if you're in the surrounding areas, if you're driving through, stop by and say what's up. But tonight, we're going to be talking about spirituality and sex. How our sexual education or sexual miseducation has been impacted by our spiritual beliefs, by the church, and by society in general. But before we even get into the conversation, I want my brothers to introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right into the discussion. Brother Tamel, I see your mic already off, so.
Hey, everybody. My name is Elder Tamel Brown. I am an elder in the Church of God in Christ. Also, I am an elder and going to be soon a pastor of my own ministry, Fruit Bearer Ministries. I'm also a singer and songwriter as well. And so I'm just glad to be here with you on tonight, AB and JB, and have this discussion with you guys. And also, I'm the founder of Single Saved with No Kids.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jared Bargety, and I am the host of the Lost in Translation podcast, and also an admin of Single Saved with No Kids as well, and also an admin for several YouTube channels, pretty rather large YouTube channels as well. So we've had an opportunity to have these types of discussions in mass and in different locations. So what we bring to the conversation is different aspects from around the world, just to make sure that we stay level as to what's really going on around the world and what people are talking about as far as this topic is concerned. AB, thank you so much for having us today.
Man, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate having you brothers on. So when I talk about the sexual miseducation of Black men, I'm specifically talking about some of the unhealthy, some of the toxic, destructive lessons that we have learned in our community concerning sex, concerning women, concerning relationships, and how those lessons impact our relationships and how it impacts us as Black men and how it impacts our community. I always say for far too long, we have allowed one of the smallest organs on our body to have the most control over our lives. And I truly believe that's because the way we are conditioned, the way we are programmed, the things that are constantly pushed upon us in our society, in our community as Black men, pushes us in that direction more than anything. So tonight, as I said, the conversation is about our spirituality and our sex, because, you know, in the Black community, we get a heavy dose of both. So I always like to start with a foundation, just to see where the brothers are coming from, where the brothers, you know, what their history is a little bit when it comes to this topic. So my first question is, if you could think from when you was a boy into your adolescent years and as you grew and matured, who, what, and how did you learn about sex?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. And so at a young age, you know, I learned about sex by playing, you know, with my penis, just to be honest with you, and just, you know, realizing that you can get pleasure, you know, from, you know, playing around with your genitals. You know, at a young age, you kind of discovering yourself. And I just want to tell you about this experience really quick is to what I really got involved is finding out more about sex is, you know, back in the days, we used to, you know, have VCRs, and you put in your video cassette, like we'd have movies that we like to watch on a VCR, or I'd be taping, you know, videos, you know, from Rap City and, you know, Video Soul and all that kind of stuff. And so I went one day to put that video in and realized that my stepfather had a porno in the VCR. And so once that came on, wow, you know, it was just like, man, look at this. And so that really, I think, had an impact on how I viewed sex as well, because I saw those images of the naked ladies and the naked women very early. And so seeing those images, it prompted me to try different things with the young girls, the little girls, you know, that was, you know, coming to visit, you know, my sister at the house and doing different things with them. And so, you know, sexually trying to discover, you know, what that sex was all about, wanting to experience what they was experiencing in those videos. And so porno, I think, was a major impact on me discovering, and not just talking about it, but seeing the images. Yeah.
You know what? My earliest memory is my father talking to me about it. And one of the things he was talking about was, you know, hey, don't bring no kids home. But he really didn't go into no details. You know what I'm saying? Because that's one of those conversations that's kind of hard to have with a kid. You know what I'm saying? So, hey, this is sex and this is how you do it. You know, you don't get that instruction from your folks. You see what I'm saying? So basically, it kind of happened the same way Tamel happened. You know, we're hanging out with the fellas. You know what I mean? And one of my homeboys is like, hey, man, I got a tape y'all should see. You know what I mean? And all of us, you know, going outside. See, back in the day, we didn't have the internet and all this other stuff. We had bicycles. football, basketball, that type of thing. We stayed outside. So, we were mischievous. So whenever, somebody said that, hey man, I got this tape you want to see. And basically that's how me and my brothers got exposed to something like that. You know what I mean? The neighborhood, But most times it's always usually your friends. It's never your family. It's never, church folks or whatever. It's always the homies. You know what I'm saying? And how they found out, I have no idea. You know what I mean? Maybe they had a tape laying around like Tamel's stepdad did. You know what I mean? But that's how we got introduced to it. It was like, man, what in the world? So, it was like, this is wild. You know what I mean? As boys, like, is this what this is supposed to be? You know what I mean? Is this what's going on? So, in the back of your mind, you don't realize what you're seeing is an act. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of times you don't understand that there's more components that go into sexual relationships than you have wisdom to deal with. So as boys, we're kind of left unguarded as to what to expect, because all we have to go by is what we see right now. But we don't understand that there's nuances to this thing. You know what I mean? And so if nobody knows that you know this thing, it's kind of like a secret you keep to yourself. Like, I didn't see the tape. I know what's going on. I'm grown now. You know what I mean? Then you get the line to the homies talking about, I done had sex with all these folks. And doggone well, you ain't did nothing. You know what I mean? Just wanting to fit in. You know what I mean? But sometimes people try to use, your ability or your wanting to fit in against you. You know what I'm saying? So we would rib the fellas or whatever. You ain't did this. You ain't did that. You know what I mean? Knowing full well all of us lying. You see what I'm saying? But, you kind of had an idea. You be like, if I run the tape back in my mind, I can pretty much fake it. You know what I mean? and that type of thing. Knowing doggone well you ain't did nothing. You know what I'm saying? So it's pretty much the same way. Your friends pretty much egg it on. It's like the blind leading the blind. Basically, that's how it usually winds up. So usually how it became to be in my mind is through friends and hanging out with them and getting into mischief. So that's basically how it happened with us.
Yeah. When you first said that your dad sat down and talked to you, I got excited.
Yeah.
I'm about to get impressed. I'm about to say, oh yeah, really?
Yeah.
I was impressed. But then when you said all he said was don't bring no babies at home.
Exactly.
That reminded me of all the lessons that I got. Don't bring no babies at home, wrap it up, leave them fast girls alone. Right. And that was about it. That was the end of the discussion right there. Right. So there really wasn't much education. It was just a lot of, fear mongering and a lot of warnings. But to go into what sex was about, how to be responsibility with my sexuality, those conversations never happened. As I prepared to write the book, I probably interviewed close to 100 guys on this topic. And I would say 95% of them said that they never ever had that conversation with a parent or even like a responsible adult about what sex was. 95% would say that they learned about sex through pornography or through music or through the videos, through the internet, through sexual abuse, through watching magazines, some very corrupted ways in destructive ways of learning about sex. And I found that a lot of the guys that I spoke to and interviewed learned sex in this way. So this what made me really excited about writing this book, The Sexual Miseducation of Black Men in America. I realized like how widespread it is that we learn about sex from some very underqualified, unequipped sources.
Right.
Yeah, and we take that with us a lot of the time through adulthood. So I want to jump straight into the discussion about, our spirituality, the church, and sex in general. When we talk about being a man of God, being a Christian man, let's talk about the fight and the challenges that we face being in this society and also trying to walk a certain walk. What are some of the challenges? What makes it so hard for a Christian man or a spiritual man to walk that fine line? What are some of those challenges when it comes to that?
I think a few of the challenges is just that if you're usually attracted to women just as a heterosexual male, period, women are beautiful. Women look good, right? And so when we see women that we're attracted to, women have nice bodies. And we are excited, by the physical appearance. And so that alone, because we like women and are attracted to women, that in itself is appealing to us. And so I would say what happens usually as far as when you talk about the church and sexuality and things of that nature, the fight is tough because a lot of brothers have a lack of discipline in their flesh to be able to control, their appetites for some women. So a lot of times what I realize is that what the church teaches, and I love the church for this, is that the church teaches that, you should have sex, right, in the confines of marriage. And that should be the only place, or in that covenant, sex should be taking place. But outside of the marriage bed, the church doesn't teach young people about, the importance of waiting, or the importance of make sure that you find somebody that you really enjoy being with, or somebody that you have a good relationship with. The church doesn't teach on, I guess, the intricacies of sex, as far as the church demonizes sex. They make sex, seem like it's such a nasty, dirty thing. It's taboo to talk about sex when we talk about the church and brothers in the church. And so that makes it seem like the issue of sex is really taboo, that it shouldn't be talked about unless it's about marriage. But really, I think we should be, having these conversations with the young men in church. And brothers, we should be talking about sex on a consistent basis, because we know that if we as brothers, or even as women, if we make the wrong decision and have sex with someone, and then we know we don't really love them, but we were just having sex with them because of their act, and we wanted to just, pleasure ourselves because she looked good and I look good, and we just want to have sex. You got children out of wedlock that take place where you really don't want to be in a relationship, but now you're attached for life, and you have a child, and then you're attached to a woman that you really don't want to be with. So it just ends, in a very, very bad situation sometimes, where you don't want to be. And so I think if we talked about it more, because sex is a beautiful thing, it's a wonderful thing. Sex feels good. And I just think that sometimes we demonize it and don't talk about it enough. We don't educate the young men in the church about it, like specific questions, in certain situations, things like intimacy, because we always talk about sex, but how can we as men or young men be intimate with a woman without sex? How can we treat her and love her in a way without sex? Because, as we're as young men, we have our uncles and the older cats on the block, and whenever you I guess I don't like the word, but I'll say conquer a woman sexually, or they see that you got a lot of women in their eyes, you're the man, because you got a lot of women, or you slept with a lot of different women, and so that increases, your reputation. Hey, Tamel is the man. Look, he got that girl, got this girl, and so I just think that we need to, as the church, not demonize sex, but be open to talk about it, even outside of the covenant of marriage. Just because we're talking about sex doesn't mean that it's going to encourage others to do it.
One of the things that we don't talk about in church is sex, as for what it's for. You know what I mean? It's to multiply. But here's the thing about that. There's also responsibility that comes along with that. You know what I mean? In certain cultures, you can't get married until you is at least 40 years old. You know what I mean? You got to have some kind of wisdom about yourself, some kind of knowledge, so you can pass on to your kids. Well, here's the thing. If you're already a kid and you don't know anything, so all you're going to do is pass nothing down to your kids. You know what I mean? If you're having kids, early. So what happens is, in church, we don't talk about our connection with our spirit. You know what I mean? As far as men are concerned. And what people don't understand is that we're part mortal and part immortal as far as the spirit is concerned. Yes, we focus a lot on the the immortal part, but the mortal part and how they work together in concert is something that we don't discuss. You see what I'm saying? And what happens is, if you're going to be a leader someday, then why not discuss leadership? How does that affect the family? How does that affect your legacy? You see what I'm saying? Now, in the Bible, they talks about legacy. They talk about this person begot this person, begot this person. And a lot of times in the Bible, they're always talking about who's training who to be the next person. And lineage was very, very important. So it was true enough. People did have it for pleasure or whatever. But for the most part, people guarded their seed. And we don't, these days, we really don't guard our seed like we used to. We don't guard our name like we used to. Coming up in the day, when people want to know who you are, you be like, you're Boggity, is your daddy boy. You know what I'm saying? And my dad already had a reputation, so I had to live up to my dad's reputation. I can't be out here gallivanting in the streets and making my family name bad. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So when you go up in church, that legacy piece is very, very important. But here's the thing, when you get out in these streets with the homies or whatever, you kind of put that to the side and you want to fit in with them because those are your contemporaries. Those are the people you're going to be hanging around with, growing up with, that type of thing. So you kind of move that stuff to the side, but there's always still that thing in the back of your mind. Don't mess up the family name, brother. You see what I'm saying? That type of thing. That is the spiritual part that we rarely talk about. But it is a part that we need to get together as men and discover and say, hey, look, you are more than just flesh and bones. You're also spirit man too as well. And what happens is that people don't always relate to you physically, but they may relate to you spiritually. Whatever comes out of your mouth, they'll be able to detect it. You see what I'm saying? So what happens is that when people start, dating or whatever, you kind of, know whether or not you're going to date this person or not, that type of thing. But you can pretty much tell where somebody is spiritually just by having conversations with them. And when you're young, you don't know that. You know what I mean? As an older man, yes, I understand that. But as a younger man, you don't focus on stuff like that. It's just like, you cute, I'm cute. We need to get together, blah, 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 blah. But the legacy portion is a part that we don't discuss. And I think that is a very important part that would actually curb a lot of the stuff that we see going on today, where people are just having kids, and not being married, but not understanding the purpose and the confines of having sex in marriage and why it's important. So those are some of the things we really, really need to focus on and say, hey, why is marriage so good, in relationships, and why is sex supposed to be confined inside of marriage? So those are the conversations that we really need to talk about. And once we address those, then we can flesh out this other stuff, the legacy, the spirit man, that type of thing. So those are some of the things we need to look for.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a young lady in this discussion group that I run. And one of the questions she asked, why is it so hard to find a man in church that still wants to abstain from sex? Why is it so hard? And I had to help her understand that, even though a man is in church and he's a man of God, like, he's still a man at the same time. Exactly. And we still have those challenges. We still battle with flesh. And we still battle with temptation, and we're still attracted to women. Now, of course, we definitely want to get to a stage in life or a level of maturity where we can overcome those type of desires, and we can, like Tamel said, have the discipline to abstain. But the challenge is still real for us. Even I don't care, from the pulpit to the door, the challenge is still there. So yeah. It was an interesting conversation with the young lady, because she just couldn't fathom how men in church are still, I shouldn't say run by lust, but still battle with lust. And I was like, we all still battle with lust.
Right. We just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Men are physical creatures. Men are physical creatures. Like, and just in general, like if you, me, Jared, or you, AB, usually, like, if we see a woman that's fine, we say, oh man, look, that girl is fine, right? We don't say, oh, she got a beautiful mind. Nah, we don't. We look at the physical. Men are just physical, you know what I'm saying? Right. So we look at a woman's body, we look at a woman's shape, and that's what we're first attracted to, is a woman's pretty face, her body style. And so I just think it's a very natural thing, just to be attracted to women. And so the hard part is disciplining the flesh, and you got to have a made up mind to want to abstain and wait, to have sex, because it's hard. You women look good, you're beautiful, we're attracted to you, and of course, there's some women that's attracted to some of the fellas. We're handsome to them, and so it is a struggle at times, but it just takes, I'll just say, a close relationship with the Lord Jesus in prayer continuously. Stand before the throne of God and asking God to give you strength, not take the desire away, because you want that desire to continually be there, to want to be involved with a woman, and not just sexually, but intimately. And see, that's the thing. There's a difference between intimacy and sex. There's nothing wrong with the kissing. There's nothing wrong with the hugging. There's nothing wrong with the holding, if you have discipline in your flesh, because those things can lead to other things if those things are happening. But as you were saying, AB, I was just thinking about, as you were saying, I wonder why sometimes we get too spiritual with things. You know what I'm saying? Because God can give you strength to hold on, but being attracted to someone in sex is just a natural thing. God only approves of it in the covenant of marriage, and I'll shoot out a scripture there so we can be scriptural when it comes to spirituality. But Hebrews 13:4, marriage is honorable in all, but marriage is honorable in all, but whomever and adulterers God will judge. And so it's an honorable thing, right, to be married. But we have to talk about that natural part before getting to that marriage covenant. It is a struggle when you are really attracted to someone and you really genuinely like somebody. So it's just natural. It's not always a spiritual thing where, oh my goodness, he should be closer to the Lord. And oh my goodness, I can't believe he has these thoughts because he's a man of God. No, like you said, AD, we are men. Yeah. We are attracted to women.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like just the spiritual side and I guess the biblical side of how the Bible or spirituality teaches, when we talk about sex, we talk about the covenant of sex, talk about the intimacy, the connection of sex. Society often teaches men, black men, about, just the performance of sex and satisfying our horniness when it comes to sex. What would you say is some of the biggest similarities and differences between the way the Bible teaches about sex and how our community or our society teaches about sex?
Well, if you look at it this way, most men are conditioned to only look at sex one way. I was reading this article the other day. It says most men love language is physical touch. Well, the only time men usually get touch is to get sex activated. You see what I'm saying? So if you've never, ever been touched as a man without being activated sexually, then you're going to have a improper balance as it comes to intimacy when it comes to people like holding hands and that type of thing. Or if your woman rubs your back, you know what I mean? As soon as somebody touches you, it's like, oh, it's time to have sex. You know what I mean? In the back of our mind. And 9 times out of 10, it is that lack of intimacy or that lack of physical touch that actually causes men to have an improper perspective as far as relationships are concerned and intimacy and physical is concerned. Now, in the church, it's one of those things where they tell you, oh, just don't do it until you get married or whatever. And then you get married, it's this whole buildup until it's like, oh man, it's just, just sex. You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. Right. So they try to build it up to be this thing that it's really not. But at the same time, there are other aspects of intimacy where sex is used as a tool to facilitate closeness. And 9 times out of 10, what happens is that we're not educated enough to understand how to be intimate with each other without sex. You see what I'm saying? Because sex is something that's easy to do. But to sit there and to listen to somebody and to look into their eyes and to hear what's coming out of their mouth and to feel their heart, that is what we're not taught. But the easiest way for us to get to that is through sex that we know of until we get trained. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think it's just a form of expression, right? When you really love somebody, right? That you just want to express to them how you feel about them. You really love them. You're enjoying their company. And I think, just like you were just saying, JB, about the intimacy. You're spending time with that person, getting to know them, learning, things about them, what they like, what they don't like, and you're just developing and building a relationship. And so when all those feelings are taking place, where you're starting to feel that you love them and that you appreciate them and that you want to be with them, it's just a natural desire to want to, go inside of her, because that's the highest form of a way that you can show how much you love her, despite, just the intimacy portion. Usually in marriage, you consummate the marriage and you have sex, but it's just an expression of, showing her, how, you feel about her. You want to make her feel good. She wants to make you feel good. And you want to experience this pleasure and bliss from sex. And I just want to keep making this point. Sex is wonderful. Sex is beautiful, but God is only approving of it in the covenant of marriage. And so we just have to just stop demonizing sex and making this thing too spiritual. So the intimacy should lead to a sexual experience in the covenant marriage, but we know that doesn't happen all the time because we're not educated. And, sometimes, as you were, back in the days, they had all these different songs about performance, right. I think some of these artists, Missy, Want a Minute Man and all this other stuff. And, and so we have, the pressure of men to perform, right? And so if you have that pressure performing, and instead of, I guess being more settle and, making love as far as in a certain way, we talk about beating that thing up and, we're gonna really work it, because
right.
That pressure is there in the songs and it's just there. Even in conversations with some Christian women, right? You had these conversations and even they desire, and some of the, women that I've talked to in the past, they want you to make sure that you perform and make sure that they are satisfied, and they want to satisfy you too. Now, it's not just people out here in the world who don't have a relationship with the Lord Jesus, but that same pressure and expectation, is on you to perform well. And so that's why you have all these different commercials and, all these commercials with the Viagra and all these different commercials about your testosterone levels, making sure that they're high, all that's in the media. And it does trickle from, outside of the church into the church, because these are the expectations, not just of Christian men and women. Not just of worldly men and women who don't have a relationship with Christ, but those that are in the church too. We have that same mentality, and you do want to be pleasing to your woman, but it doesn't have to be in the form or a way that, the world is always expressing that we should do it in their way.
Yeah. I don't think people really understand the amount of pressure that boys and men feel to perform. Like, it starts from very young. Like we was talking about our peers. Right. Like sometimes just those conversations in the locker room can be a huge amount of pressure, because guys are saying what they've done and what they've experienced, and if you know that you haven't done or experienced those things, you probably try to avoid those conversations, or you end up lying just so you don't get ridiculed, don't feel left out, you don't be the butt of the jokes. That is a lot of pressure on a young guy growing up. And it doesn't stop with the peers. We have our older men pressuring younger guys. I remember when I was younger, older family members or, guys that ran away just asking me questions like, hey, you kissed the girl yet? And I'm like 12, I'm like 12, 11. So there's an undertone of pressure when it comes to that.
Right.
One thing about men, we don't know how to nurture, but we definitely know how to pressure each other. Like when we try to bring the best out of each other, we're not complimenting, we're not encouraging. We think that if we point out all the things that somebody's not doing or what they're doing wrong, that's going to bring the best out of them. And that might help a lot with sports, but we do the same thing when it comes to relationships and sex and women. Like, and it has the opposite effects when it comes to that. So we definitely need to learn how to nurture our young men a little bit more instead of putting all that pressure on them, because that's when they make decisions and they start to engage in behaviors that they're not ready for, they're not prepared for, but because of that pressure, they feel like they have to.
Yeah.
This
is. Oh, my bad.
I was just saying, you can't brute force your way through life all the time. Sometimes you have to finesse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then sometimes the elders need to teach these younger men. It ain't so much as how you can force something, it's how you can finesse it. You see what I'm saying? Make sure you go through life being a gentleman and being graceful. You see what I'm saying? You don't always have to be the ruffian all the time. Sometimes you got to be a gentleman and a scholar. You know what I mean? Because you're not going to always be able to fight your way out of everything. You know what I mean? You're not always going to be rough. Sometimes you're going to have to be soft. You know what I mean? Even though you can be rough, sometimes it's better to be soft.
So true. So true.
I want to address a question real quick that Focus asked. She asked, what is intimacy, or can we define intimacy from a man's point of view? How would you brothers define intimacy? We've used that word a few times during this conversation. Do you think our definition is different from women, or is it the same? Or how would you define it?
I think it's similar to how women may define it, because I think that intimacy is just closeness. It's developing a bond with the other individual, with your mate, whether it be through entertainment, just spending time with them, going different places with them, traveling with them. And so that's part of intimacy as well, just getting to know that person on a level despite, just sexually. And so intimacy to me is, telling each other your most sacred thoughts, being honest with one another in communication on what we desire, what we need, talking about the future, our life plans, and things that we want to accomplish together. Just building that foundation is part of that intimacy. Is that getting to know you process, and intimacy doesn't have to involve sex, but it can be somewhat physical as far as the intimacy is the kisses on the cheek, the hugs from behind, the holding, the holding hands, walking in the park type of thing, and so that's how I would, define intimacy. It's just a closeness outside of, having the physical experience of sex.
Also with that as a mental component as well. And like a lot of times we like to focus on the physical, but there's also a mental portion as well. Being in tune with your partner, knowing basically what they think takes time. You know what I mean? Finding out exactly who they are, what they believe in, why they believe in it. You know what I mean? How do they become the person that they are that day? You know what I mean? That type of thing. What are some of the things you guys take time out to talk? Do you sit down and ask them, hey, are you okay? Is there anything on your mind? You know what I mean? Those types of things, those stolen moments, because we're so busy with work and kids and all this other stuff. And sometimes we'll forget about our spouse. But sometimes intimacy is learning how to stop what you're doing and checking on your partner to see how they're doing on the inside. Because 9 times out of 10, most people don't check on people all the time. They don't. It's just like, hey, can you perform? You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. Can you go? As men, we have to get it. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes we treat women like they're men. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, can you go? When we playing football, it's like, I know you hurt your leg, but can you go?
Right.
Can you put some tape on it? You know what I mean? Can you go? That type of thing. And sometimes, women can't be handled that way. Sometimes they have to be, handled gently, because that's how they were raised. They were raised gently. So we have to make sure that we relate to them gently. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So intimacy is knowing how to communicate and how to bond with your mate, whether you're male or female. You have to be able to know how to navigate somebody's emotions. You see what I'm saying? And how they handle life. Because some people, you have to learn them. Some people like to have, they have OCD. They got to have stuff clean all the time. So you got to make sure you keep the house clean. Don't, leave stuff hanging around, because that agitates them. If you know that, then that's also a part of intimacy as well, because you've actually taken the time out to learn that this person needs to have things a certain way, and vice versa. So that level of intimacy is something that we don't focus a lot on, but if you do it, it actually helps bond the relationship better over time. It's basically like taking a rope and putting a knot in it so you can hang on for dear life if ever you're in trouble in your relationship. You see what I'm saying? If you need her to forgive you for something, or if you need to forgive her for something, you can always use those moments, those tender moments of intimacy, to use that rope to hold on for dear life. So that to me is what intimacy is, making sure that you have a connection or a bond that you service on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think both of you brothers define intimacy perfectly, so I'm not going to even add to the definition. But what I will do is to acknowledge how, as men, we are not conditioned and programmed to develop intimacy, and that's one of the whole topics or the whole ideas about this sexual miseducation system that I'm talking about. We aren't taught to develop that closeness, that connection, that type of intimacy that is required in a relationship. We're actually taught the complete opposite. If you want to develop intimacy, if you want to release like that oxytocin, it's things like hugging, holding hands, complimenting each other, laughing together. You know, all those things is what create intimacy with another person. But if you grew up watching porn, listening to some of this music, listening to your peers, sexually abused as a young boy, there's nothing intimate about any of those things, and it doesn't teach us how to be intimate. We only learn how to be aggressive. We learn how to be forceful. We learn how to be chauvinistic when our sexual foundation is coming from places like porn or the music and things of that nature. So it actually cuts off any desire to be intimate. I can remember even growing up, like the guy that was in a relationship with one girl was the guy that was actually, he was ridiculed. He was made fun of. But it was the dude that was able to cut off his emotions, but and not be emotionally available, but still be sexually available to a bunch of women. He was the dude that was championed, and that's this whole sexual miseducation system that I'm talking about. We understand what intimacy is, but we're not taught how to develop it as a child and in our adolescence and as a man. So that's the challenge that I'm trying to take on with this book and with these conversations. How can we teach this to our young men? You know, so that was just a question I was throwing out there. But
you know what? Here's the thing: we need to teach our young men not to be afraid, because if you think about it, every bad decision that we've ever made sexually came from fear. You understand what I'm saying? Fear of being ostracized by the homies, fear of not being able to perform with your girl, fear of what other people will say about you if you don't have any kids by a certain age. It's basically charged by fear. But if we are able to re-educate men and use love instead of fear, we begin to champion relationships like marriage and say, hey, you know what? I can't wait till I get married. I can't wait to talk to my bride every day. I can't wait to share life's experiences. I can't wait to have kids. I can't wait to take my kids and my wife on trips. I can't wait to, watch my grandkids one day. You know what I mean? Watch them go across the stage when they graduate. You know what I mean? Those type of, I can't wait to one day when I'm sitting back in my rocking chair and all of a sudden my grandson says, "Granddaddy, can we go outside and play?" You know what I mean? Those things we need to start energizing and focusing on in the love portion of this, and to give it a new source of energy instead of fear. Just think about everything that we talked about tonight was basically fear-based, and how we were to protect ourselves as men. But if we had the conversation with a different energy and a different fuel and different mechanism, and use love instead of fear, then what couldn't we accomplish as men? You have Tamel, he's getting married pretty soon. That's a great thing. I'm looking forward to it. That's my brother. I want to see him do well. You know what I mean? Those type of things. So whenever we see a brother, we don't want to tell him, keep your heart 3 stacks, keep your heart. Now I want to say, no, go ahead, Tamel, go ahead and get married, man. You got this thing. You know what I mean? We want to change it up. Instead of using that message of fear, telling me keep your heart 3 stacks. No, man, go ahead and be the best that you can be, man. And start a new legacy. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So giving men love as the fuel to charge their intimacy, sex, and love and spirituality would definitely change how we view, how we handle each other, and how we handle sexual desires and needs and the purpose of relationships and spirituality.
So if a man grew up, or if you grew up with the foundation of porn or whatever it was that fed this miseducation, at what point in your life did you decide to start to apply biblical principles, godly principles, to the way you handled and managed your sexuality? What was that turning point for you guys?
Well, once I accepted Jesus Christ into my life as personal savior, that helped me a lot to just mature as a person, period. Because the closer you get to the Lord Jesus, it does, mature you, because your focus is more on doing God's will and doing what God's requiring of you, as a man, by fulfilling your destiny. And so the focus is on fulfilling your destiny and fulfilling what God has for your life. And so that's the main focus. And so then when you talk about, as far as my past was being introduced to sex through porn, very young. And so it takes a discipline in the flesh. I'll be honest with you. It took a lot of praying. It took a lot of fasting. Sometimes I had to go into my prayer closet. I had to disassociate myself, from people, as far as so I can be strong spiritually. God was building me up to be strong spiritually, so that I can overcome some of these temptations. I didn't go to a lot of parties and, do a lot of hanging out, when I first accepted Jesus Christ in my life, because I needed to be focused, on him. And that helped me a lot to kind of get my flesh under subjection. Now, I'm not going to say that I haven't had sex outside of marriage, even being saved and sanctified and filled with the Holy Ghost. So my thing is, you definitely have to have a made up mind to not, have sex. It's every decision I made. It wasn't pressure. It was a decision. I wanted to have sex with that woman. But I tell you what the battle is. The fight is this. The fight is that, once you've had sex outside of marriage, then now you understand what good sex is. You understand what bad sex is, because you've had some really wonderful experiences. And I know myself personally, I've had some ones that was very poor sexual experiences. And so now, right, I have an expectation, right? But this is the thing. This is the key. This is why I want, you have to stay close to God. And it was God's will, right? This is the problem. It was God's will that every man and every woman would wait until marriage to have sex, because we wouldn't have anything to compare it to, right? We wouldn't know what bad sex is. We wouldn't know what good sex is. And so once we made love to our wives, that would be our experience. And we would take that experience and say, well, I like sex. I enjoy sex, but there wouldn't be this expectation of, I want it this way. I want it that way. This is what feels good to me. You learn that as you have sex with a woman or with one another. You learn the things they like. You learn the things they like to do. But that's the problem. Like, because of before with me with having a lot of sexual experiences, my expectation and my desire grew to have it a certain way and have it like I liked, right? And so that wasn't God's will. And so we were supposed to build that relationship, not physically, but with intimacy and closeness. And as JB was saying, mentally, right? Trying to develop that bond in other ways. And that's why we have to re-educate our young men and re-educate them to treat women, correctly, as far as don't look at them as a sexual object, but look at them as yourself. Because if you love yourself, you're going to treat that other person greatly, because you love yourself. And in order to love yourself, you have to love God. In order to love other people, you have to have a relationship with Jesus Christ and with God, because God is love, right? And so I just think that we just need to teach our young men how to date women, how to treat them right, take them out, say nice things to her, compliment her, things like that. Not like we grew up, AB and JB. Oh yeah, man, when you get that, man, you're gonna have to tear that thing up, man. Look at that, look at her, her body parts and all that. Yeah, we learn like, okay, so we gotta make sure we work that. So it just needs to be a change in mentality. We just have to re-educate our young men and give them a different mentality and the main thing is to teach them about a relationship with Christ. Because when you start reading the Word of God, the Lord will teach you about marriage through His Word. The Lord will teach you about fornication and why you shouldn't do it and things of that nature. So they just need to be re-educated in God's Word, and it's a prayer life is definitely needed to overcome, some of those temptations, to have sex outside of the covenant of marriage.
You know what? One thing for me, it was, if I could give people advice, it would be to make sure that your entire village is helping raise your child. And what I mean by that, for me, it was actually being around my grandmother on my mother's side all the time. And she would always be saying the same old Bible verses all the time. Even though when I was young and I couldn't remember, I couldn't read, but I could always remember what she said. She would always say, train up a child in the way you go, and when he's older, he will not depart. She used to say that so much all the time. I used to know it before I could read it. You see what I'm saying? So as I got older, I still had that tug, you know what I mean, to go back and have something to be grounded on, so I don't go so far. You know what I mean? That type of thing. That is that internal compass that you have to have as a young man that has to be put there early. Because if it's not put there early, you're going to go too far. You know what I mean? Like the Bible says, narrow is the gate, straight is the path. Here's the thing. It's hard for you to walk that path when you look over and all your homies is having fun, but you got to walk the straight and narrow. You know what I mean? But as an older man, now that I see that if you walk that straight now, you look to the left, to the right, the homies ain't looking so good right about now. But I'm straight. And you know what? Granted was right. You know what I'm saying? And I have to respect that. You know what I mean? But at the time, it's hard to walk that thin line because you are so impressionable as a young man because you want to fit in. And that's that fear thing I was telling you about. But at the same time, if you got somebody like your granny that's telling you that you love your granny to death and you want what's best for her, you know what I mean? That type of thing. You're going to listen to her. You know what I mean? You're going to listen to your grandparents. Everybody in that village is going to be teaching you throughout your whole entire life. You don't turn your ears off. You don't turn your eyes off because the lesson is over. The lesson is on all the time. You know what I mean? Let's say kids learn from all the time. They listen. You have to be careful what you say around them. That is true. You know, I used to eavesdrop and listen to my grandmama, pray over people all the time. You know what I mean? I'm supposed to be outside playing. I'm like, what's she talking about? What's she talking about? Jesus on the main line. What's his number? You know what I mean? That type of thing. So my whole thing is this. You have to make sure that you rely on your village because there's only so many hours in the day that you as a man or as a woman could raise your kids. Because think about it. Your kids are going to be influenced whether you like it or not. And it's better that you get to them first than the world. You know what I mean? It's a battle between, your instruction, which if you're a Christian, you want to raise your child a certain way versus the world. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's going to take a while for those words to catch up until you have something to measure it by. All of that stuff my grandma told me when I was a little bitty boy didn't catch hold until I got old and had something to compare it to. You know what I mean? She's like, don't be out there messing with them fast tail girls. You know what I mean? That type of thing. I don't know what she's talking about. I'm going to go out here and hang out here with these girls. You know what I'm saying? So what happened was, I'm like, I better not be messing with them fast tail girls. Granted, and then come to find out years later on down the road, she got 3-4 kids, about 4-5 baby daddies. And I'm like, Granny was right. I didn't want to be in deal with that. Because you want to have your own family. You want to have your own kids. You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. You want to have your own legacy. And when you get intertwined with other stuff like that, it kind of makes it difficult. So everything that you've been taught may not always apply in this new situation that the world has set up for you. So I would rather that you listen to how you were raised, if you're raised right, and apply that and walk your life that way, because it's easier for you to do what you've learned versus you trying to learn something you've never done before. Does that make sense? Yeah. So a lot of times when we get miseducated, like AB said, we have the sexual miseducation of the black men in America. It's because we haven't been raising these guys from the jump. You know what I mean? We're catching young men 15, 16, 17, 18 years old when they've had a whole entire lifetime before they met you. And it's hard to undo thinking when you get past a certain age. It's impossible because you're going to be like, okay, this is how I was raised and this is how it's going to be. I don't know if you guys ever been on a date with somebody and they've had some type of trauma or whatever like that. That is hard to undo their experience. Their experience is their experience and it's real to them. You see what I'm saying? Just like your experiences are your experiences and they're real to you. But the problem is when you try to put those things together, that's difficult because at that point you have to learn how to trust each other. And that's where intimacy comes in, where you're allowed to be vulnerable, but you got to do it in a way that's safe. And I reading the question was, how can a woman create intimacy for our men or lovers or show emotions? When you have the opportunity, when a man shows you the opportunity to be intimate, make sure you take care of that particular moment, because if you mess that up, he's not going to trust you with his emotions ever again. He's not. He'll go through the motions. Hey, baby, how you doing or whatever. But if you use that against him at any point in time, he's not going to open up. You're teaching him that he can't be vulnerable with you. Does that make sense? So those are just some of those things. We have to make sure that we're comfortable with our emotions. We have to make sure that we're tender with each other when we're dealing with each other and not so rough with each other. As men, we like the rough house or whatever, but emotions are real in men as well, too. Men have emotions as well, too.
Yeah. And I think to address that question, I think there's a step that actually comes before creating intimacy for your male lover. I think it's important for women to understand that men and women, we do not express our emotions the same. True. So it's good to acknowledge that no matter how much space you try to create or attempt to create, that it just may not match with the way that you express your emotions. So be sure not to misunderstand or misinterpret the way he communicates and expresses emotions, because it doesn't match with yours. But then, of course, what JB said, as far as, creating the space where he can express the emotions the way he does, and, not judging him, not criticizing him, you not becoming defensive when he expresses these emotions. Because once those things happen, if he expresses emotions and you get offended and become defensive, he may shut down. If he expresses emotions and you start to criticize him for expressing his emotion, he's going to shut down. If he expresses emotions and you decide to stonewall him and start giving him the silent treatment because of him expressing his emotions, he's going to shut down. So you definitely have to create the space for him to freely express his emotions and understand that we are not going to express our emotions the same. So don't get mad at me if my feelings don't look like yours. I may not cry at a drop of a dime. That doesn't mean something doesn't hurt me. I just wasn't conditioned to express my emotions in that way. So I think that's important to also understand. There was a few comments that came in before we wrap up. I want to make sure I highlight these comments. I seen them coming in. Folks says sexual expectation also come from people talking. So even if we wait, many will still and would compare the conversations. I think that's what you were saying, Tamel. Yeah, as far as us having sex and how we compare it to the people of the past. And I think if I go back to the sexual miseducation, that if we grew up watching porn, I found myself comparing women to the women that I was with to women I watched on TV. True. So I wanted them to be almost limitless with things that I wanted them to do. Yeah, I wanted them to do almost everything, and I don't want to get too graphic, but right. I didn't get that from myself. I got it because I've seen it. Right. And I'm like, hey, that looks like it is enjoyable. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to, you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And this is true for AB. You gotta be, this is a real conversation you gotta have with your woman anyway, because you want to be sexually compatible, right? But like you were just saying, sexual compatibility is very important. You have to have those in-depth conversations, find out what she will and what she won't do before even getting into the marriage covenant. So you have to be on one accord with that. But like you said, and I agree totally, is those images and those things from porn that you saw, and you want those women to be limitless and to perform, the woman that you're with to perform the same way as those, porno stars. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? but it's not always reality. You just have to find somebody that you're sexually compatible with, because let's be honest, we got some women who saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost, but they are freaks. And now, I mean, when they are a woman out and classy in the streets, but a freak in the sheets, and that's what you want. Well, that's what I want. So I'll be quiet.
That's what I want.
Don't
put it out there, brother. You got Robin
I had to
said,
go there, AB. I'm sorry.
Hey, no, don't apologize, brother. Listen, don't apologize. Hey, you're about to walk down that aisle soon, so you got to put it out.
Oh, yeah, we
Robin says the kids can learn all you teach them and still fall prey to worldly things.
Absolutely.
That is true. That is true. It's teaching consciousness and consequences. Yeah, okay. Got some good comments coming in. I'm not sure. She said many weren't raised right, sir. I'm not sure what she's speaking about, but
just people in general, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is the best way to learn a man and the way he communicates? What is the best way to learn a man and the way he communicates? Let's make this this probably be the last question before we wrap up. But any of you brothers want to tackle that one? From Kelly.
I'll tackle that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's time, and you cannot cheat the process. It's nothing but time.
I agree.
Here's my whole thing about that. I had this conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and I said the reason why we having a hard time in relationships these days is because we're not investing time into the relationship. You know what I mean? The proof of love is the investment of time. Where you spend a lot of your time is that's where you love. You know what I mean? So there's no way around it. You know, it's just one of those things that has to take place. You got to let the oxytocin kick in. Sometimes you got to let it wear off for you to make sure you're making a good decision. You know what I mean? But time is one of those things that you can't. I mean, it's absolutely required, because you'll learn things along the way. You don't understand how powerful time is, because time reveals all things, how that person interacts with adversity, how that person interacts with, death, how that person interacts with, life and all type of problems. You know what I mean? How do they express joy? The only way you can figure that out is through time. So my question is, how do you learn somebody and how they communicate? Just talk to them and spend some time with them.
Okay. All right, brothers. I think that's all we have for the comments. Oh, no, it's not. We're listening.
They cooking down there.
So you want unhealthy people to pretend and have healthy relationships. Maybe she can elaborate on that. So you want unhealthy people to pretend and have unhealthy relationships. I don't, that will be unhealthy in itself.
Right.
Want the people to pretend to have healthy relationships. No, and I really don't. I don't think an unhealthy person can pretend, but for so long, and definitely an unhealthy person cannot have a healthy relationship. You can mask it for a temporary amount of time, but eventually, that hurt or that pain or that unhealthiness is going to come out and is going to pollute the relationship. So, I don't think
she responded at the bottom. She said it was in reference to his freak comment.
Let me break something down real quick, just to just give a little bit more context into what's needed from both of those questions, and I'll talk about my 3 S's. What's needed when you have a conversation and when you're really getting to know someone is to find out, number one, if you're spiritually compatible, if you both have the same faith and believe in the same God. And I think that's important, to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So you got to be on one accord spiritually, that you make sure that you're serving, the same person, God, Jesus Christ, or whatever you believe in. And number 2 is the social compatibility. And so you're getting to know someone, finding out if your lifestyle matches, if they're fun to be around, if you enjoy being in their company. And 3 is sexual compatibility. You have that conversation about what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what you like, your desires, and all of that, and make sure that they match. And so that's why that would eliminate those comments here about being in an unhealthy relationship, because you find out through those conversations and finding out if you're compatible with somebody by getting to know them. And so you got to really get to know them, ask those hard questions up front. You know, all the questions about what's your favorite color and what restaurant, do you like, what's your favorite restaurant? Those are things that's surface things, but you want to really get deep into the heart and the mind of an individual and find out those things. So that's important. And so that you would eliminate being in an unhealthy relationship. And you have to make a decision. Once you find out that information, you have to make a decision. Hey, you know what? I can see myself spending the rest of my life with you. And then the second part is, well, we need to not be in a relationship because we just aren't compatible and suitable for one another.
Right. Anything you wanted to add to that, JB? Well, let me say something real quick, because of course, me and you, Tamel, we've been on a lot of lives together, a lot of panels together, and your 3 S's is always something that resonates with me, and I always think when we talk about the sexual compatibility and having those conversations, I think people often, they may assume that you believe that we're just talking about the position that you like, or how do you want it,
right?
You in the morning or the night. But the conversation has to be even deeper than that,
right?
Because there's a lot of individuals, there's a lot of people that have some very, I should say, traumatic sexual experiences in their past, and that can affect their present sexual relationships. Some people may not want to be touched certain ways, or they might respond to a certain way, and if to a touch a certain way. And if we don't have these conversations and you don't communicate, what you've been through in your past, I might feel rejected, you might feel rejected. So it is important that you have these deep conversations about sex, more than what your favorite position is, but what your sexual history is as well, what you've been through, what you experienced, so we can know how to deal with that in our current relationship, just in case I mistakenly trigger something. So it's very important.
Truth. And I want to clear it up, and I think there's some questions, but number one, you want to make sure that you're spiritually compatible with that person. Number 2, you want to make sure that you're socially compatible with that individual. And number 3, you want to make sure that you're sexually compatible with that person. And like AB said, it's not about finding out, I like it doggy style or whatever you want to, go into detail concerning that. We won't. But I'm just saying those are not the conversations I'm talking about when it comes to sexual things. But what do you like? Well, what do you prefer? What kind of sexual experiences have you had? And even these things, are you a person like AB was saying? Some people have been molested, some people have been raped, and some people don't like being touched because of that reason. And so you find out that some men and women are standoffish because they've been molested, or they may have had a homosexual past. You don't know. So you have to find those things out when it comes to the sexual part. What kind of sexual experiences have you had? Are you a virgin? Have you never had sex? Find those things out. But, and later down the road, you can go into detail about what you like and experience in the past if you want to, but that would be, up to you and that individual. But what AB said makes a lot of sense about that sexual conversation, but just wanted to make sure you guys got it.
Yeah. I think they going off about the 3 S's.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to write a book on that one, brother.
Hey, AB, check it out. I am coming out with a book, and it'll be out in the next couple of months. So
you're making it seem like you're out here test driving.
This is about AB. This is about AB.
3 S's. Hold up.
So I'll save that for later.
All right.
My book and stuff.
All right. Well, listen, I think we're going to end right there, brother, because the comments are running in, but I promised that I would not keep you on long. So please, if you have any last comments, or if you just want to tell the people where they can find you, please take this opportunity to do so.
Hey, AB, thank you so much for having me on this discussion. I really do appreciate it. I want to congratulate you on your book. Go get AB's book. I know it's good. I plan on buying it myself. But this is a wonderful topic. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed. And I know that your book is going to enlighten some people and kind of change some mentalities. And that's what's needed in the Black community, you know, with our Black men and women. But I am Elder Tamel Brown of Fruit Bear Ministries. Also, I'm the founder of Single Saved with No Kids. You can catch me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm all over social media. You can check out my singing and my music on YouTube. And so also I have some videos of singing and ministering on YouTube, Facebook, and not so much Instagram, but you can catch me in all of those different places, all those social media outlets.
All right. Thank you, Tamel. AB, I want to thank you, man, for writing this book, because it's about time. You know what I mean? Just to let you know, I got it in my Amazon cart right now. So when midnight hit, guess what I'm gonna have? I'm gonna have a copy of that book ready to go.
Yeah.
So my thing is we need that type of information. So we have to rewire how we were actually raised and how our perceptions of relationships and how sex as a man should be handled. You know what I mean? That type of thing. And to address those things that we need to address and not be afraid of. I'm looking forward to it. So my thing is this: make sure that everybody, you get a copy of the book, and make sure you tell all your friends to get a copy of the book as well too. And then we're going to have us a nice little conversation, man, because it's about that time. You can catch me on YouTube on the Lost in Translation podcast, also on Instagram, and also Jared Bargett on Facebook. So I'm all over the place on your favorite YouTube channels. If you look in the comment section, you'll see me. I'll be there listening and bringing those conversations back so we can talk about it here on Facebook and on YouTube and those type of things. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to appreciate you guys for letting me come out tonight. Thanks, AB, for having me. And Tamel, as always, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, always, sir. Always, sir. Pleasure, you know, always talking and discussing things with you brothers.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being on. Thanks everybody for watching. As the brothers was saying, I do have a book coming out. It's dropping tomorrow, March 18th. It's called The Sexual Miseducation of Black Men in America. I wrote this book for 4 specific reasons. One, I wanted to explore the psychological, the spiritual, the relational, the behavioral impact that our sexual miseducation has had on so many different aspects of our lives as Black men. 2, I wanted to teach the next generation of men real ways of measuring manhood. I think for far too long we have been taught that our manhood is measured by the amount of women we sleep with or how well we perform in the bedroom. The 3rd reason I wrote the book is because I wanted to help parents that have sons, young sons, teach them how to take their prince and elevate them to that position of king. And the 4th reason I wrote this book is because I wanted to help Black men to face one of the biggest challenges that we have had, in my opinion, that we've had, and that's overcoming the temptation of casual and meaningless sex. I truly believe that has knocked so many of us off our destiny, off our path, and off our goal. And I think that there's still a window of time where we can teach the young men and even older men new ways of managing their sexuality. So that's the sexual miseducation of Black men in America. The book is dropping tomorrow. You can follow me on my Facebook page at AB Bracewell or on my Instagram page. I have one, Ready for a Relationship, or The Sexual Miseducation of Black Men in America. Anywhere you could find me. You could go to my website to get the book, or even on Amazon. I prefer you go to my website because Amazon, they don't like giving you royalties. Oh,
really? I'm glad. I'm gonna take it out the cart then. I want my man to get all his money.
But once again, brothers, thank you. I appreciate y'all. Always a great conversation when we get together. Thank everyone for watching. Thank you for all the comments and the participation. I'm pretty sure we could probably even go longer because there's still some comments coming in. But
right,
I promise we're gonna be on here an hour, and we're 14 minutes over. So y'all have a good night and God bless.
God bless.
God bless.